People always seem surprised when I tell them I try to garden all year round, either in the greenhouses or in a hot bed, or even out in the open garden. And they wonder how I can do it. So stick around and I'll give you 10 tips on growing in the winter. Alright, first of all, people ask me if you can grow all year round in an unheated greenhouse. And the answer is yes and no. A lot depends upon what zone you live in. If you're in zone 1 through 3, which gets an average winter lows of -60 or -30, then you will probably not be able to grow in an unheated greenhouse. You're going to have some type of heat, or you're going to have to avoid planting like 8 weeks between December 1st and February the 1st. And then you can start planting out your warmer weather vegetables and get those started. Now, if you live in zones 4 to 7, which gets between a -30 and 10 degree Fahrenheit for the low in the winter, then you can probably get by with a low tunnel inside your greenhouse, or a frost blanket, or anything that will help protect the plants in the wintertime at night. If you're in zone 8 and 10, which only gets 10 to 40 degrees, there's no problem. You can just grow it without any problem whatsoever. So that is the first tip on growing in an unheated greenhouse. Secondly of all, you have to know what crops to grow. In the colder weather, you want to grow crops that are called cool weather crops. They're these other crops that can take a frost, can even take a freeze. Those are the ones you want to grow in the wintertime. You also want to grow with the winter sun. Now this might be different than what your summer sun is. So you're going to have to kind of watch in the winter time and see what part of your yard gets the winter sun. You want to get as much sun as possible during the winter. And usually your beds and your greenhouses that go east to west have a better chance of growing in the winter. The fifth thing to consider is grow under a cover. For every cover that you add, you're adding like 1.5 zone. You're lowering yourself to 1.5 zone. Like if I'm in the 6 zone and I put a cover over like my greenhouse now becomes a 7 to 6 to a 7 or an 8.5. By adding another layer on there, I've turned it into an 8. So each layer you add a protection is going to make your zone down at 1.5 points. So you can plant more plants that are more tender with more under most covers. Wow, that was a mouthful. Okay, point number 6. Grow either in the beds or in raised beds, or in ground or in raised beds. You do not want to grow in containers in the wintertime. They just freeze up and the roots they just freeze. So avoid container growing in the winter. If you must grow, like I have a couple of containers inside my greenhouse, I just throw plastic around them or a frost blanket over them and help add that extra layer to them. So instead of being in a zone 6 or 7, I've added another layer to them and they're in zone 8. Just remember that in the wintertime, you're going to be watering much less, and you're going to have to make sure that they get air. You're going to have to vent. 7 is to grow in cessation. Means plant one thing after the other. Okay, so you want to have a constant turnover. 8 we've already covered, and that is to make sure you vent to avoid overheating. 9 we've covered, water only when it needs to be. You won't have to water every day like you do in the summertime. And your 10th one is probably one of the most important ones, is don't harvest while things are frozen. Let them unthaw and then harvest them. So those are the 10 tips I have for growing in the winter. I've got animals here everywhere. So we're going to be growing things that are cool weather plants. These would include your carrots, your beets, your radishes, turnips. I got a little cheat sheet here. Onions, garlic, celery, broccoli, cabbages, your mustard greens, leeks, parsnips, lettuce, spinach, kale, Swiss chard, Brussels sprouts, peas, potatoes, and rutabagas. These are things that you can grow in an unheated greenhouse in the winter time. Remember to get them started in time so they are fairly well mature before the sun goes to less than 10 hours a day, because once that sun hits that point, your plants will not grow. They will just kind of stay the way they are until they'll grow slowly, but they won't grow fast. And you can still harvest them. You can still eat off of them. And then as soon as that gets back to 10 hours or more a day, they will take off again and produce really well again until they're done. And then you can put in your spring crops. So that's how I harvest and grow year-round in my greenhouses. Like I said, the first year I started, I just had my raised bed, and I put a hoop over them, put a little piece of plastic over them, that was it. And another bed I had, an old glass shark door I put over it to turn it into a little temporary greenhouse. Those worked great. Now I've got the big greenhouses, so I don't have to worry about all that maintenance, putting those together each winter. So you can start your outdoor winter gardens very inexpensively and move up as you become more experienced. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned something. Remember, like, share, subscribe, and dream big. Follow that dream. Remember to rotate your pantry and keep busy. And God bless. See you in the next video. Bye, everybody.